Now, Ashley Hapgood and Annie Williams are from Auckland in New Zealand. They are both female and they have specific requirements for the kind of man who they want to be the father of their child. And they've taken to Facebook, can you believe, to find their perfect donor. According to the couple, he has to be a cool dude who is taller than them, doesn't want to be a dad but is willing to be present at birthdays and other important occasions with a clear medical history. They would prefer it if their donor wasn't white because they would, and I quote them, just love a mixed bub. My immediate reaction is to think that these two people should never be allowed to have children, let alone try and find a father for their so-called perfect child. But getting away from that, I wonder when you decide to have a child, whether it's by IVF, whether it's through whatever means, surely you just accept the child that you're going to get. You can't... do we really want to go into a world where we think, I want it to be a girl, I want it to have blue eyes, I want the nose not to be too long, but just the right size, perfect ears, I want brown hair, probably curly would be nice. We're talking about horrible things here, aren't we? Things that Dr. Mengele might have thought was a good idea back in the Second World War. I'm very, very uncomfortable with anybody who tries to manufacture what they think is a perfect child. Do you see anything wrong with it? I really do. I do think it's morally bankrupt for anyone to want to choose the characteristics of their child. Now, I don't think it should be different just because you're not having a child through the so-called normal, natural means. I don't think that means it's different at all, but maybe I'm being old-fashioned here. And if it makes parents happy to have a child of a certain type, then maybe you think that that's the direction that we should be heading in. It's not a world I want to live in. 0345 6060 973 is the number to call. Well, let's talk to Josephine Quintavala, who's Director of Core Ethics. Josephine, very good evening to you.
Good evening.
I don't know how much you agree with what I've just said. Probably not much, I don't know. But, the ethics of this are fascinating, aren't they?
Yeah. The first thing you need to look at is it's so offensive to men, the approach that they're taking and the role of fatherhood, because they even state in the article they want somebody who doesn't want to be a dad. And I think that's incredible as a kind of an abuse of the male. I want to use your sperm, but you're not going to have anything more to do with the child. And you can ask, doesn't a child have a right to a father if it's possible?
They would argue, the child's getting two parents, we don't necessarily need a man.
Yeah, well, they do need a man. No matter how hard they try and how much around beating around the bush they do, they need something that a man can offer. But, I would like to say that fatherhood in the male is not just a sperm donation. It's a role that's very important in the...
What about the ethics of trying to choose the characteristics of your child?
Well, I think they're on a highway to nowhere because notoriously these kind of projects go wrong. So they're not going to get very far. But then what are they going to be deeply disappointed and give it back if it hasn't got all the, doesn't tick all the requirements they put on their checklist? I think a child has a right to its own identity, to certainly, to a father if it's possible, and to be wanted for itself alone and not because you've got a design in your head, like you want a teddy bear or something. It just really is very, very...
But that's what we're talking about here. We are talking about designer babies, aren't we?
Yeah. I think also a lot of this idea that you can design is a bit ridiculous because in actual fact we're far away from being able to design a child no matter how hard they try. To think that so you can get a tall man and have a short child, there's nothing that you can do a sum that adds up to exactly what you want. But also, if you don't get what you want, what do you do? Give it back.
Well, exactly, because in the end, if you try to design your perfect child and the child appears and they may have some of the characteristics but not all, you're inevitably going to be disappointed, and that's the last emotion you should feel when you get your child, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I'm glad to see, at least in the article, that there's a shortage of offers of people coming forward. It seems that you can reach a stage of absurdity with women and their designer babies where people wake up to the reality of the absurdity of it and the offensiveness of it. I mean, I think the statements are very, very offensive against
Well, I mean, to be fair to them, they say that at the bottom of the post, which they say is tongue-in-cheek, they say, obviously, at the end of the day, we just want a healthy baby who we can dote on forever. Well, fair enough. But part of my problem with this is it actually plays into prejudices, because there will be people who say, well, I don't believe that people of the same sex should be having children anyway, and these two are a good example of why that shouldn't happen. And I would find it difficult to disagree with that, frankly, because they're clearly, you look at some of the pictures that they posted about themselves as well, they don't look as if they've grown out of sort of being teenagers.
Well, no, and I'm certainly sort of saying we want a sperm donor and it has to be somebody who doesn't want to be a dad. I mean, that's contradiction in terms. That, you know, that the biological, natural role is, you know, male sperm meets female egg, and that's how the child comes about. So, I mean, they don't even seem to know the basics of biology.
Well, it's all a bit rum. Josephine, thank you very much indeed. That's Josephine Quintavalle, Director of Core Ethics. Well, let's talk to Laura Vitchens, who's Chief Executive of the National Gamete Donation Trust. I have no idea what a gamete is. Laura, hello.
Hi, Ian. Good evening.
Hi, what is a gamete?
Gamete is the medical term for egg and sperm.
Right, I'm glad I've asked that now. I do understand. What do you make of this story? Because we're talking about perfect children. Is it even right to want a perfect child?
I never thought I would agree with Josephine on anything in life, but hey-ho, we do. In principle, I completely agree with you and her that there's no such thing as a perfect child. This is not the right way to go about it. But I do want to take this opportunity to put it into context. Even on a subconscious level, most of us do it when we look for our partner. Part of that is, does it fit my bill? Because if we make a list when we're younger, you want a taller guy or blonde or whatever it is, your ideal partner. We all do that, even on a subconscious level. Having said that, I completely agree with the fact that putting two sets of genes together doesn't predict what a child looks like. I'm not saying it because this couple is involved into it, but most people know, for instance, the Beckhams. They got 4 children. Do they look like each other? No, they don't. Yet they come from the same set of genes. And just by determining one half doesn't mean that you know it's going to get out there. And, of course, you know, they produce their own set of genes to it as well. I also completely agree with you should love a child no matter how, you know, no matter what happens to it. You can ask for a tool donor, but if you smoke during pregnancy, that will actually have much more impact. Or if you eat really bad food during pregnancy, it will have a bigger impact on the health of the child than anything else. Of course, it's totally reasonable to want to have a healthy donor. Having said that, going online and finding somebody via Facebook in the same way that you would buy a sofa or that you would buy, I don't know, whatever you buy from Facebook, if you get a donor via Facebook or whatever social media, you have no idea about their medical history. And that's the other thing. I think if you really want the best for a child, are you going for a guy who you connect via social media, who could well be, if he's that type of guy, he could well have, I don't know, 10 or 15 half-siblings to your children in a 3-mile radius, and then I think you're actually very selfish rather than actually thinking of your child, and I do think that's wrong.
So tell me a little bit about what your organisation does.
One of the things we do is the National Sperm Bank, and what we try to do is get enough donors. There are plenty in the UK already, but to have equal access. So if you are a private patient in, for instance, London or Manchester, then you're lucky because you have access to sperm via a private clinic, but quite a few other patients across the UK do not have access to that because there's not enough in certain clinics, or you have to pay horrendous fees. So what we see in the UK as well, especially with same-sex couples or single women, they use the unregulated services, and we think that in the UK we need to get a robust system in place so patients can go via licensed channels so they know that the donor is safe, sound, checked, tested, and also very important that we know there's a maximum number of offspring from the same donor, which if you use a donor online, you just have no guarantee, you have no idea whatsoever.
Well, it's a fascinating subject. Laura, thank you very much for joining us. That's Laura Vitchens, Chief Executive of the National Gamete Donation Trust.